All right, welcome everybody. I'm here with Luke Fritz. This is the first time connecting with him, and he has taken over recently the Star Wars CCG graded sales sheets, which is awesome. So now we got all the data in Luke's hands, somebody who is able and willing to go deep into this since Cam is so busy doing his sports betting and Florida thing. Luke wants to do this full time, and I know you are rich with information. I'm very excited to connect with you. We will be doing a Star Wars collector spotlight on you, but first we got to hear about taking over this graded stuff. Luke, it's so good to have you here.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I'm really happy to be a part of this community and to just try to help as much as I can. I connected with Cam and Mark because they posted out on the graded forum, basically looking for help. Cam had said that he was taking on a new role. It was going to take a little bit more time from him and looking for help with updating a spreadsheet. And I, just by my profession, I'm a teacher. So I teach like social studies, high school, but part of my job that is sort of a little bit unusual is that I'm also what's called the 9th grade success coordinator at the school that I work at, which involves a lot of data entry and a lot of like sort of tracking and seeing which students to support the best. Basically, it means like I am pretty good at manipulating data and Excel sheets and that sort of stuff. And so when Cam and Mark reached out, I was like, yeah, I mean, this is perfect. One, I'm on paternity leave right now. Our darling daughter, Amelie, was born in late June. And so I have a few months.
Congrats. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I know Matt Manning also just had a baby girl. So we've been connected a little bit on that too. So so I have a bit of time on my hands, especially during the weekdays when our first child is at preschool. So I reached out to Cam and Mark and said, I'd be very happy to do this. I don't want to be paid. I'm just happy to be a member of the community that would be helpful here. And they were like, sure, cool, let's do it. And so, been enjoying diving in, getting a look at the data and found some interesting, cool discoveries.
So this is fantastic. So you're already doing a lot of stuff, data, and knowing how to read it. So you're already an expert in that field. And now we have a rich set of data that is only growing by the day in this Star Wars collectible field, which is super exciting. Obviously, for those who've been collecting for a long time, this is kind of like a new frontier, a new challenge, in a place where everyone's got the master sets or almost them or gotten what they wanted. And now it's like, okay, now what, but like, this is like, oh, this is totally uncharted. There's so much you can do with it. Sure. And there's a new hunt now, right, for the top grades of each of these cards and some of the stuff. So very excited with this. And as Mark and, Cam and some of the others have predicted, the prices have been climbing and more sales. More people jumping into the market. We're seeing new faces. I at least once or twice a week hear about somebody new who's like, oh, I just came across this graded group and it's super involved and active. And like, I just want to be part of that, because there's plenty, you could grade just about anything, but that doesn't mean there's like a collector club, like, a core group of people that are, communicating and challenging each other and supporting it and in a positive environment. Am I right? I mean, I can't think of that many. I mean, especially when you hear about graded Pokemon, it's just like a zoo, and Magic, they got their own problems, right? But this feels new, fresh, different over a high quality product. So
I'd also add on to that. I think it's like a really welcoming and kind of close knit, it seems like, community from what I've experienced so far. I love like the monthly competitions that are kind of run. I love the idea of like, tips and tricks and like, oh, some sets are really difficult grades and here's why. And just sort of that community knowledge that's kind of being passed around on the graded stuff. It's pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah, I've definitely learned a lot about the different sets and quality of sets where I was definitely not paying attention to that. I mean, for the longest time, like collecting my master set, like the difference between mint and near mint was like,
whatever. Exactly.
It looks nice, like cool to fit the binder, and that's that. But now it's like more important than ever, and where they played or not, or how many times they passed around. And now we're seeing even more so. There's like how much sealed product is left, right? Like we don't really know, like probably a lot, but we don't really have population reports. So there is always that constant speculation of like, of what's left sealed, right, is going to be really what's possible to grade in the future, which now people are like, well, if there's less of something that's sealed, there's a good chance high grade quality of those cards are going to be harder and harder to come across, right? So even though, and then you have the flip problem, like some sets are just so expensive that it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
really hard to grade those, if you want
Mm-hmm.
to put them together. There's going to be some people that can stretch that far, but if you come across, it looks like Coruscant boxes, right? Reflections 2 and 3 boxes
Yep.
are not cheap. So yeah, I mean, I think that's why we've seen a great entry point in with like Cloud City, and I'm sure we'll see some Jabba's Palace sets
Yeah,
come through, right? And
for sure.
certainly Premiere is such a big set, but there's so much of it that
Yep.
I'm sure we'll see some of those. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it was really
yeah.
it was really interesting to hear when like Cam was ripping his Reflections 2 box, you guys talk about like how much possible product is out there, like in terms of like sealed reflection. Like, so they made X number and like show the number on the bottom of the box, right? Of like how
Right.
many things are made. I think one of the people on the chat were something like, there's probably 1,000 boxes like out there total at the moment.
Right.
And I just thought like that's such an interesting, like it's such an unknown, right? Like
Yeah.
of
Totally.
yeah, what is possibly out there, and yeah, what floats up. Sometimes we get somebody on like the main Star Wars CCG Facebook group will say, oh, I just came across these boxes for $50 and bought them all. It's like, what? Like,
sometimes I wish I were in a position to do stuff like that.
yeah,
Definitely not, right? But I
yeah,
mean, something like Hoth Japanese, which is like the ultimate rare, I think
for sure.
last population report that was done on boxes was maybe a 12
Yeah.
that could be accounted for, which is not many.
Yeah.
Obviously that's crazy rare.
Right.
Maybe there's a few random ones sitting in a warehouse somewhere, but again,
Yep.
like of that, who's going to be ripping that for graded product?
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll ever do that. I don't know if I could bring myself to do
Yeah,
that.
I know.
Yeah. I do have most of one of everything, but I don't have a Reflections 2 box. I don't have a Hoth Japanese box.
Yeah.
I think I can live my life without
Right. Like without the sealed product. I'm just going for sealed packs at the moment, I should say too. I don't, the idea
that. I have
of
less
sealed boxes of everything is, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, what are your take? You've listened to now some of our feedback on some of the graded product, and now you have some of the data to support some of that. What has been, confirming for you in going through this data, and what has been, more or less of kind of a surprise or shock of, some of the trends you've been seeing in the data?
Sure. I think confirming is the growth. I think you're right that when I go back and look and see how much has recently been put on the market as compared to a few months ago, like it's a lot. Like the growth is definitely there, and it's not just like PSA. Like there'll be other companies that'll appear.
Beckett, and SGC, and
CGC started like getting some pretty big sales on eBay this last month as well, which I wasn't even looking for, and then I kind of came across it and was like, oh gosh, we should start tracking that too. And so I think that has been a pretty interesting kind of revelation for me. The previous like updater, I think that was working with Cam and Mark wasn't as intricately or intimately, I guess is the word I'm trying to use, familiar with Star Wars CCG. It had been like kind of entering in data points that some were valid and some were not. And so when I went back through and like sort of cleaned up the sheet and said, okay, well, this is an actual Star Wars CCG card and this is not. I was, pretty surprised to see just how much and how the level of product that's been kind of out there recently on both sealed, actually. Like some of the sealed product, like just very recently, last week or so, there was like a Coruscant box that went up for auction, just live auction. That had not happened in like a year and a half. And so those.
Well, in fairness, like I bought my Coruscant box in, I don't know, at least the last 6 months, 4, 5, 6 months, but I did it not on eBay.
Right. And so that's interesting too, right? So like the idea of how can we track or keep account of non-eBay purchases. I think what Cam and Mark are really good at is like, hey, approach us with a verified sale of, graded or sealed. And we'll add it to the tracker. But like, it was funny. Mark was saying once when we were messaging together, he's like, for sure the Jedi records here are incomplete. We're just trying to do the best job we can in terms of updating and knowing what's happened there. So
But eBay's still going to have the bulk of sales.
Yeah.
Sure. You know,
And I
it's going
guess
to be
something
hard to
that
track Facebook Marketplace, you know.
right. There's not possible to really track
Right.
down. So eBay has a pretty interesting seller tool called Terapeak, which goes back 2 years. And so I've been kind of going back in the data 2 years, like 130 point, which is also a very helpful tracker. That just kind of goes with completed listings on like eBay's Buy It Now and stuff, or fixed price. And that is like maybe 30 days, 60 days, 90 days worth of data. Whereas Terapeak will keep track of that for 2 years. And so I've had a lot of, this is very nerdy, but I've had a lot of fun going back and looking for like search terms such as Star Wars customizable sealed minus CCG. So like that term means CCG cannot appear in the title. Usually if I or anyone else that's pretty familiar with this would search eBay for Star Wars CCG sealed box, right? Like you'd see all the sealed product out there.
Right.
There's some sellers that look at the box and it says Star Wars customizable card game special edition. They don't know what they're doing, and so they put out like Star Wars customizable card game sealed special edition box, but don't use CCG. And so the tracker, which previously had been filtering just for CCG sealed box, didn't have that. And so like it's been pretty interesting to discover some random sales. Like for instance, there was a Reflections 2 Mara Jade foil ultra rare that went for some random search term that was totally out of the blue. It was like Star Wars PSA customizable minus CCG that went for like $50 last December. And I remember talking to Cam and Mark and me like, oh my God, someone got a huge deal here that like they had the right search term on. So part of my work recently has been trying to track down as many possible like variations within the last 2 years of both the sealed and graded product and trying to find like data entry points. And so, yeah, basically it's been pretty interesting to see kind of what's out there and what has stuff sold for in the past. And then obviously to track like the live stuff that gets up and gets purchased as well.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think for all us insiders, like CCG is just something we're automatically going to type in.
Yeah.
We're not going to type a customizable card game, you know, either, right?
Right.
That's
so it's like what are the search terms
mouthful
that are out there? Yeah, that are
and maybe that's just totally insider language that we're using for that.
Right.
Or maybe they label them. Sometimes they label them TCG.
Right.
You know, everybody else uses TCG, right?
Right.
Even though it's, I mean, it is a trading card game kind of, but it's not.
Yeah, but I would never. Yeah, that's right. I would never look up a Star Wars CCG product using TCG. So that's another thing. Maybe I'll go look at that and see if anything pops up.
Yeah, I've definitely seen listings like that, and I'm like,
yeah,
like okay. What else was I going to say? Could you, in the data too, I think I would like to know, like, either a plot graph of, you know, all the listed grading companies, like by month of the sale percentage. So it'd be like 60% was PSA of sales, Beckett 20%, you know, SGC 5%, HGA2 or something, you know, like something like that, or like a pie graph pie graph of like what was used that month or quarter. It would be really interesting to see if certain grading companies have increased or decreasing, especially with CGC coming in. Like, how much market share are they taking? And of that market share, who's really losing the most? You know, like Beckett's been like on a downfall, you know, for some other reasons, right? Like, does that mean they're taking away just their share, or are they taking away SGC and, you know, CGC equally or whatever, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the market has expanded so much that obviously the clear dominant is PSA. I mean, it's like 90% PSA or more at the moment, but like.
Sure, but these things will evolve too. Like as the companies come in and we'll get more balance. So it'll be interesting to see over time, you know, because people are speculating on some of these long term, right? We can't just look at the nearest 3-6 months.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, we got to think bigger than that.
Agreed. Yeah, I'd be curious to run that data as well. Like I was just brought in like late-ish August and started, you know, kind of manually entering stuff. The other companies, aside from PSA, are pretty rare finds in terms of updating. BGS is like, I would say maybe 3 to 4 a month appear at the moment, where PSA, it's like 3 to 4 a day, you know, like that's the type of data we're dealing with. But then, it's always interesting to go down a rabbit hole on all of the different possible grading companies that we had, and CGC again, just appeared recently. There was an Emperor Palpatine 10 foil that went for like 1,400 just in August that we just completely didn't even have because I wasn't even looking for CGC. We had not had a single CGC item on our sheet until I was like, oh yeah, well, this is starting to pop up as a grade. So you're right. Like it'll fluctuate. Like there'll be new stuff that appears, who knows, in the future, like what gets graded and what takes over the market. But for now, I mean, it's pretty clearly PSA where we're seeing a lot of new product or a lot of sales for sure, like just more and more, it seems like. I'd love to do the growth chart. I know that Mark, when you guys do the like quarterly updates, sometimes have some like good data charts and stuff too. So maybe we'll wait till the next quarter to be able to...
Greg he puts out like the sealed
that,
sales and set sales.
Yeah, which is awesome too. Like that was so helpful to me when I was getting back into collecting and like looking at revised prices, because I never collected the master set of revised until I got back in recently. And so like having some sort of data of like, okay, where am I supposed to be at with this was really, really helpful. So I hope that this sheet is something that long term is a pretty helpful thing for the community of like, okay, well, here's how this is developed. Here's what this used to go for. Here's what it's currently going for. Because if you're going in blind, it's pretty difficult as a buyer or a seller to know what your product is worth.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's so much more we can talk about here. Unfortunately, I have to wrap this up because I got to pick up my son.
Okay.
From school, but yeah, in terms of, I'm very excited to see what you gain from your insight of the data and sales. We've seen some crazy sales going on, and I'm following them. I'm bidding on them. I swear, I'm not winning them because people must be last minute like quadrupling whatever the top bid is.
That's right.
Okay, I guess I'll stick to grading Japanese Premier cards because nobody wants those in the cheap.
They'll eventually, man. Everything has value. Yeah,
that's a whole other story. But anyways, thanks for chatting, Luke. And
of course,
look forward to the next one.
Look forward to chatting again later.